Hey there, my name is Alex. I am the Silver Mont, and in this video, we're going to be taking a look at Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, which shadow dropped not long ago, much to my surprise. Disclaimer, I received a review code for this product from Koei Tecmo. As it happens, Ninja Gaiden 2's original version on the Xbox 360 is one of my top 5 video games. It received an updated PS3 release called Sigma 2, which I was not a fan of, to put it mildly. So imagine my surprise a few years after the Master Ninja collection to see not only Ninja Gaiden 4 announced, but a shadow drop of Ninja Gaiden 2 remastered in Unreal Engine. First things first, let's talk about what version of the game this is. This is not the original Ninja Gaiden 2, nor is it Sigma 2. It's almost like a hybrid of them. It seems to be using Sigma 2 as a base, though. Thankfully, the most egregious changes of Sigma 2 are either gone or lessened. See, they couldn't get Ninja Gaiden 2 to run properly on the PS3. They had to drastically cut down enemy count, they removed limb clutter, and other things. To make up for this, they boosted enemy health values a lot, which really messed up the balance and feel of the game. One of the core tenets of Ninja Gaiden 2, the reason it feels so good to play, is because you shred enemies, you shred bosses, you shred everything. Almost every boss in Ninja Gaiden 2 can be defeated in moments, even on the max difficulty, because the director of the original game, Itagaki, understood that a tense battle doesn't need to be a drawn-out battle. It can be over in a few flashes of steel and violence. Sigma 2 removed virtually all of the gore, which was baffling, considering the main game mechanic involves slicing off limbs and tearing enemies in half. Instead of blood spurts, chunks of meat, and fallen limbs everywhere, limbs vanished in a path of pretty pink mist, and I am not exaggerating. 2B, 2 Black, this new one seems to be running on a modified Sigma 2 as its base. The violence is back, there's blood and limbs, but the gore isn't quite how I remember, especially with the tonfas and their meaty chunks. Turning enemies into ninja hamburgers isn't quite as satisfying as the original. There's lots of smaller nitpicks too, in regards to the visual changes in direction. For one example, during the cutscene in the first mission when Ryu leaps from the tower to the other tower, his eyes do not widen a split second before he leaps in this remaster, which you might say is a tiny detail, and yes, it is, but as they say, the devil's in the details. However, I think the general tone and atmosphere is conveyed well enough, and I'll not judge it so harshly on things like that as I did, say, Demon's Souls Remake, because the atmosphere is A, closer to the original than in that game, and B, not so important in this game. Tone and atmosphere do a lot of the heavy lifting in Demon's Souls, quite frankly, whereas Ninja Gaiden is carried by its gameplay almost entirely. The key feature here is the combat, so as long as that's in place, everything else is secondary. So, how is the combat? As much as I love Ninja Gaiden 2, I'm not an expert at it. I don't know things like frame times or technical data, and it's been quite a long time since I played it last as well. But for the most part, this one feels close to how I remember on the basic level of combat. Some people have said there's a much higher input latency in this version of the game, but that isn't something I've personally noticed. Could just be my old man reflexes. That said, I will point out I have frame gen turned off and I set the game to 60 FPS. I've seen a few people saying that higher frame rates bizarrely introduce more input latency, and frame generation always seems to do that. Enemy health values, though, feel about where they should be, and a lot of encounters feel like it's the same number of enemies. But I can hit a ninja with an XXYBY and finish them off. But please correct me if I'm wrong. So the combat feels right, it feels balanced, more or less originally how it should have been. How about other changes? Sigma 2 introduced several new bosses and new stages. For example, you can play as Ayane, Rachel, and Momiji. These levels somewhat mess with the pacing of the game, but they aren't terrible. I do wonder what the point of them is, but I'm not opposed to them, necessarily. I'm fine with these characters making appearances, but I think it was beyond stupid that Kasumi showed up in a pointless cameo, and then she was playable in Ninja Gaiden 3. She's not the sort of person who goes around tearing people into chunks. They really should have left her out of this franchise. They could have used Hayate instead, but whatever. The Buddha fight and the Statue of Liberty fight that were in Sigma 2 are taken out of this version, but we're also missing some of the bosses that Sigma 2 cut out from the original game, which is why I think this is based on Sigma 2. It's easy to cut things out, but harder to put them back in from a different version, if that makes sense. For example, we're missing the... I don't remember what it was called, because I don't think the bosses even had names in the original Ninja Gaiden 2. We had to find that out from like concept art and stuff. But it was like a worm queen or something in the forest level. That was cut in Sigma 2, and it hasn't been restored here. Trials of Valor, I think they're called, are also missing. The ranged weapons also work like they do in Sigma. Bow has infinite ammo, no charges, no windmill shuriken, and so on. Instead, you have the infinite ammo bow, and they gave you like a infinite ammo hand cannon for some reason. There's other changes too. Some levels play out a little different from what I remember, and I definitely don't remember Ghostfish in the original game being so numerous or so annoying. Maybe I just forgot. They definitely show up a lot more than they should be for such an obnoxious, stupid enemy. As for the missing Worm Queen boss, for example, I don't really miss that because it wasn't really a very good boss to begin with. On the one hand, I do think they should stick to being, the definitive edition should have everything the original had, but at the same time, that boss was pretty stupid. It would be like if they remastered or remade Dark Souls 1. Would we want them to include the Bed of Chaos? Does anybody actually like the Bed of Chaos? Would we rather they cut it out entirely, or put in a new version, or keep it as it was originally? Now, I would say remaster the fight and give us the proper Bed of Chaos fight, but that's just how I would like it. In terms of missing features from the original Ninja Gaiden 2, I think the Trials of Valor and the mission mode, along with the outfits, are the most questionable decisions. Indeed, some enemy placements are still sigmified. The start of chapter... I don't know what chapter it is in Black, actually, because it's going to be like 3 chapters later than it would have been. But the one where you return to Hayabusa Village after you obtain the True Dragon Sword, it's very empty. In the original, you just received the ultimate weapon, and the game immediately gives you waves of ninja to annihilate. In Sigma, and in Black, you fight a few dogs. I haven't compared every single enemy wave, but while some of them feel like they are where they should be, others are changed drastically, like all these dogs. That's something they could and should tweak in a patch, for sure. Go back to the Ninja Gaiden 2 original enemy placements, please. The game does include Sigma 2's tag mode, but for some reason it doesn't have co-op. Tag mode was basically a 2-player score attack mode kind of thing they put in, which is nice, but now you can only do it with bots, which is odd. That's another thing they should patch, make that online, make that co-op. But if you're saying to yourself, oh, I don't care how it compares to the original game or whatever, I just want to know, is it a good game? Is it fun? Yes. Ninja Gaiden 2 is one of my favourite games, as mentioned, and whilst this isn't exactly the same as the original, even a quarter of one of my favourite games is still good, and this is more than a quarter. I would say this is perhaps 80% of the original experience, something like that, in terms of what's there. They've said there's a patch coming up, taking player feedback into account, but for right now at least, I can't call this the definitive version of the game, but we'll see what patches and modders manage. From Koei, I would love to see them implement online for the tag mode, the ability to play as any character in any chapter, further tweaks get it closer to the original Ninja Gaiden 2, and if at all possible, maybe a original visuals toggle, like the Halo 1 remake had. And of course we need the missing costumes. Now this video hasn't really spoken much about the actual game, just about how it compares with the original, but in short, Ninja Gaiden 2's combat is still probably my favourite in any game ever. The original came out in, 2008? And it has yet to be surpassed, in my opinion. It just so perfectly captures the idea of being an unstoppable force. This isn't Devil May Cry where the enemies exist for Dante to style upon. I love Devil May Cry too, by the way, but that's different. In Ninja Gaiden, the enemies will do everything in their power to kill you, even if they've lost an arm or a leg. Ryu is a maelstrom of death. Style doesn't factor into it. He's only interested in annihilating evil in an implacable, brutal way. The gameplay aligns with that perfectly. The animations, the sound design, the map design, the feedback, everything is all in service of the combat, and the combat is just sublime. Each weapon is fantastic and feels like a joy to use. Whilst Ninja Gaiden 1 is probably more enjoyable as a single playthrough sort of thing, because it's more of like an adventure game, there aren't puzzles or anything like that in Ninja Gaiden 2, it's all combat, 100% from start to finish, fighting. And on the topic of weapons, True Dragon Sword, Tonfa, and the Kusarigama are my favourites. Although the Lunar Staff is so overpowered that it's hard not to use that. But that about does it. In short, this remaster is closer to the original, ergo better, than the Sigma 2 version in the Master Ninja Collection. But it isn't a 100% faithful remake and remaster of the original because it's still missing things and has things added in, like it has the Greatsword added in, which is fine, but taking things out, not so fine. This is the best way to play Ninja Gaiden 2 that isn't just playing the original, which I'll point out does have some severe performance issues at times on the 360. Especially the infamous Stairway of Death. I don't know how it is on like backwards compatibility on newer Xboxes, hopefully better. Performance in Black has been largely fine for me in this version. But if you have any questions or thoughts to share, please do put them down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.